Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here for this explainer, where we're going to unpack a truly fascinating intersection of corporate strategy, public health, and financial transparency. Today, we're taking an objective look at the corporate mechanics of tobacco industry disclosures. The tobacco industry is undergoing this massive transformation right in front of us, pivoting toward what are known as harm reduction products. But how do these massive global entities actually evaluate the risks and the opportunities of this pivot internally? And maybe more importantly, how are they forced to report all of that to the public and to their investors? Well, that is exactly what we're going to uncover today by digging right into the primary source documents that mandate these very disclosures. To really wrap our heads around this, we're looking directly at the SASB standards, which recently became part of the IFRS Foundation. These are essentially the gold standard, the global benchmark for corporate sustainability reporting. Specifically, we're looking at the updated version of the standard that becomes effective for all entities for annual periods beginning on or after January 1, 2025. This means the clock is literally ticking. The rules demanding transparency from the tobacco sector are about to become stricter and far more detailed than ever before. Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. First, the tobacco accounting standard. Second, defining harm reduction products. Third, assessing the market risks. Fourth, opportunities in new segments. And finally, scope and regional strategies.
Let's start with Section 1, the Tobacco Accounting Standard, peeking behind the corporate curtain. So, metric FB-TB-260a.2. This is the specific regulatory rule driving this entire industry pivot. It demands a discussion of the process to assess risks and opportunities associated with tobacco harm reduction products. What's so interesting about this mandate is that it actually requires a narrative. It's explicitly categorized as discussion and analysis, meaning companies can't just hand over a spreadsheet of sales numbers and call it a day. They are mandated by the standard to articulate their internal thought processes, their boardroom debates, and their strategic assessments regarding these really highly debated alternative products.
And, just to give you a sense of scale here, the tobacco standard is just one single piece of a massive framework. The SASB standards actually comprise 77 industry-specific sustainability accounting standards. We're talking everything from food and beverage to technology to healthcare. These 77 standards categorize sustainability risks across the entire global economy. But the tobacco sector, for obvious reasons due to the inherent health impacts of its products, faces some of the most rigorous qualitative disclosure requirements of them all. Moving on to Section 2, defining harm reduction products, the industry pivot. Because before a company can even report on these products, we really need to nail down exactly what fits into this category. The standard draws a very clear line in the sand. On one side, you've got your combustible products, your traditional cigarettes, cigars, and pipe tobacco. On the other side, the standard explicitly defines tobacco harm reduction products as those that deliver nicotine through alternative sources with reduced exposure to harmful chemicals compared with combustible tobacco products. It's a very specific technical definition, and it's based entirely on the method of delivery and the chemical exposure profile. So what exactly are these alternative sources? Well, the standard breaks them down into three main categories that companies must report on. First up, we have nicotine replacement therapies, or NRTs. These are pharmaceutical products, right? Things like gums, lozenges, and patches. Second, non-tobacco nicotine products, which deliver nicotine but don't actually contain tobacco itself. Think electronic cigarettes and e-vaporizers. And third, heated tobacco products. These are non-combustible products that still use tobacco, but they deliver the nicotine through a heating device rather than by actually burning it. Under these new reporting standards, companies have to meticulously categorize and assess their operations across all of these specific lines. Which brings us to Section 3. Assessing the market risks, the corporate minefield. Introducing these controversial new products is frankly incredibly complex, and the accounting standard forces companies to disclose exactly how they're navigating these hazards. Under point 3 of the metric, companies are mandated to discuss a highly specific checklist of internal risk assessments. It's literally like getting a VIP pass right into the boardroom. First, they have to disclose the technical challenges of bringing the products to market. Engineering heating devices or formulating e-liquids isn't a walk in the park. Second, they have to assess consumer and public perceptions of the safety of the products. If the public doesn't believe they're safer, the market just collapses. Third, regulatory risks. As we've all seen, global regulations around things like e-cigarettes are constantly shifting. And fourth, reputational risks. Can a company traditionally known for cigarettes successfully rebrand itself as a purveyor of harm reduction? The standard demands that these companies explain exactly how they measure and plan for all of these hurdles. And let me tell you, the stakes for getting this risk assessment wrong, They are incredibly high. The source standard's public health summary actually includes this stark warning. Scientific studies questioning these assertions of harm reduction may emerge, with continuing effects on entity revenue and growth potential. This hits the nail on the head as to why the sustainability standard is so focused on this. It's not just a public health issue, it's a fundamental financial risk. If a company bases its entire future growth on, say, heated tobacco, and new science comes out challenging the safety of those devices, the financial impact on revenue could be absolutely catastrophic. Investors need to know exactly how companies are preparing for that very scenario. All right, Section 4, Opportunities and New Segments, the Horizon. Now, to keep things objective, we've got to ask, why are companies so aggressively pursuing these alternative products despite all those massive risks? Well, point 4 of the metric outlines the two primary opportunities companies must discuss. On one hand, you have capturing new market segments, but on the other, you have reducing cigarette smoking. So the really crucial point here is this dual motive. Companies are required to explain how they are using these non-combustible products to simultaneously appeal to new, perhaps younger or more health-conscious demographics, while also transitioning their existing consumer base away from highly harmful traditional cigarettes. It's this delicate, incredibly complex corporate dance of minimizing health impacts while maximizing market access and revenue growth. And these disclosure rules force them to put that strategy down in writing. And that leads us perfectly into Section 5. Scope and regional strategies, global execution. Because look, assessing a risk in a closed boardroom is one thing, but actually executing a transformation globally, that is entirely different. Under point 2 of the metric, companies aren't just asked about abstract theoretical risks, they must reveal their internal blueprints. They're required to discuss the actual scope and success of their current harm reduction portfolio. They have to detail their specific growth plans for those current products. And perhaps most intriguingly for investors and public health officials alike, they must discuss their plans to introduce future products and product categories. It forces a level of forward-looking transparency that gives us a crystal-clear window into where the entire industry is heading over the coming decades. I want to leave you with this really provocative question, which is pulled straight from point 5 of the metric. The standard requires companies to answer, do these risks and opportunities apply differently to various product segments or regional markets? And, of course, the answer is a resounding yes. A regulatory risk for an e-cigarette in Europe might be entirely different from how a heated tobacco device is perceived by consumers in Asia. It just highlights the incredibly complex, fragmented, and global nature of the tobacco industry's transformation. As these new 2025 disclosure rules take effect, it's going to be absolutely fascinating to see exactly how these corporate giants answer this question on the public record. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. I really hope this structured look at the data helped clarify the mechanics behind the headlines. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.